Welcome back to West Texas View.
Welcome back to the West Texas View. I'm Johnny Lou Avery, and Kathy Shannon, the Executive Director of the Petroleum Museum, is here. We're talking about all of the things surrounding the 35th anniversary of the museum that has been a great addition to the Permian Basin scene. And just before the break, I asked her to talk about the partnership they have with the air show, with the car show. But just before the air show happens on October the 9th and 10th, you're having what's called a Chaparral show.
Well, actually, it's the West Texas Cruisers Car Show, and it was held in September, right after our birthday, and it was the third year to hold it on the grounds. So we're doing all kinds of new things. The grounds are open for this show, and the museum has discounted admission, and so it's a wonderful Saturday. And so then on the heels of that will be Air Show, and this is the first year we've collaborated with the Confederate Air Force. We will be bringing the Chaparral 2K, which is the Indy car that won Indianapolis in 1980 with Johnny Rutherford driving it. And it's the only one of our Chaparrals that isn't white, so it's this wonderful yellow. And we will run that car at Air Show on October 9th and 10th. So we do keep the cars in running condition, and it's hard to find places to run the Indy car, and so we will be out there on Air Show weekend running an Indy car up and down the runway. So we're excited.
Well, the other thing, though, the car is such a natural tie-in to the museum because of the fuel factor, but also because the car just represents what we represent in West Texas, that we want things fast and powerful. And
That's right. You know, the Chaparral cars is such a wonderful story. It's a Midland story. They were built and designed and tested right here, not far from the museum, and so it was kind of a natural for us to bring that in. Transportation involves the fuels and petroleum and things. 6 of those cars run on gasoline. They were Can-Am cars. Now this one runs on the methanol, the alcohol base, but the whole story of Chaparral is so interesting, and the biggest piece of that we think fits us is the science and the engineering that developed those cars. You know, Jim Hall was a genius when it came to thinking about these cars, and that kind of initiative and innovation is such a big thing for us because it has to happen all the way through any kind of industry to keep it moving. And Jim Hall changed the face of racing with his aerodynamics applied to cars. And the oil industry, the petroleum industry, is constantly moving ahead with new technologies and innovations. And so really when you wrap innovation, technology, science, all of that together, it's a great fit, and because that's right where we're headed. So it's a fun thing.
And even as the cars go into looking in the future for fuel cell power and things like that, there's still all of that energy that's tied together. The energy power is tied together. But how did you form this partnership with the air show?
Well, you know, they called us and they said, you know, people who like fast airplanes like fast cars. And I think that's very true. And so we sat down and began talking about it and trying to work it out. And Mr. Hall was very excited to partner with them. He also likes airplanes, and so it just it was a natural for us. And I'm not sure where the original idea came from, but the CAF came to us, and so when we sat down and really began to talk about it, it's going to work. So that's how great ideas start.
And you know, that's one of the things that characterizes the oil people. The history of the oil people is they've always been gutsy. They've always been thinking ahead. They've always been able to take risk and do new things and try new ways. And even today in the article that was just in Texas Monthly that talked about the innovation of our Permian Basin oil people and how they're discovering new things and new ways of getting oil out and new things that people didn't think there were new ways to do it anymore. And
well,
so
the first people out here you couldn't get anybody to back you to drill for oil out here. So those first people were the very same way. They came out, they believed in something, and they worked until they proved it right. And you're right. It's that story all the way through the petroleum industry, and Chaparral Cars is the same type story. So
I think that is super. Well, talk about some. When we're talking about the 35th anniversary, and you said you've decided to have a yearly anniversary every year, but at what point did you lead into then the vision of the future of the museum?
You know, the first talk about updating the petroleum exhibits came in the late 1990s. It was, the industry was changing, and we had a board that said, we really need to think about getting some updates done. And then we had the opportunity for the Chaparral Cars. So we waited, we built that $7.2 million addition and got it up and going. And then we came back in about 2007 and said, okay, it's time to revisit this. If we want to stay current and relevant, this is what we need to do. And so we started working on it again, and we have spent right about $1 million, and we have a full detailed design. We know exactly what we're going to do. And we have worked and worked on this, and so it's time. We need to do this. We need to showcase our industry and all the wonderful innovations it does, and the timing's good.
So it's going to be like going to a new museum.
It really will.
When we get through with this $10 million,
it really will.
Which is about a 2 to 3 year project.
Yes.
So we're talking about not way in the future, but
no, we're
starting
working on
right
it now.
away. And so the vision of the future is going to not only be more interesting, but it's going to be a little bit wider in scope, and yet we're going to do it within the same footprint. And so it's just going to be a great way for the school children to learn more, for teachers to learn more, for our public to learn more about what has been our economic base for so long. And when you stop to think about what has been fueling our education system in the whole state of Texas.
Absolutely, that's Santa Rita Well back in 1923.
With our monies from taxes. And so all of those things are things that we need to. But before we leave today, we want to remind everybody 3 things that are coming up. The air show, which will include the car show with the Chaparral car on October the 9th and 10th. But on October the 31st, be sure and mark your calendar for the Halloween thing for the whole family. And on October the 7th,
that's our family science night.
Family science
coming up
night.
Again.
So we need to get everybody here for that. And it's again, if we couldn't do it if we didn't have lots of volunteers.
That's so true.
Couldn't do it if we didn't have great community leadership. Couldn't do it if we didn't have a great staff.
Right. That's exactly right.
So everybody go out in the whole Permian Basin and support this gem that we have in our community. And also, I think you need to remember that we must have continuing support in a lot of ways for the museum. It has been such a pleasure to have Kathy here today. We have enjoyed having her over the years, and also Brenda, one of her education people that comes in and just gives us a great show. We will talk to her again in the future, but in the meantime, thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Kathy, for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us for News West 9's West Texas View with Johnny Lou Avery. This has been a public affairs presentation of KWAB TV and KWES TV.